Hi, my name is Michaela Haberkern. I'm the Executive Director at the Aurora Public Library. We're here today to talk about the library's plans for 2020 and beyond. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about a couple of different options for the library's future, where the library is now, especially with regard to our finances. We'll talk about how we want to grow to meet your needs and our mission, and then we'll have ways for you to give us feedback after. This is who we are. We provide welcoming, comfortable spaces for our community to discover new interests, to use the latest technology, to connect with the world of books and information and with each other, to help kids succeed in school and new Americans to participate fully in civic life. We do all of those things out in the community too, with our bookmobile and Mini Bee. We come to you. A little background here. When I was appointed director in January of this year, there was a bill in the Illinois legislature that provided for a referendum to give our library an elected board. This bill was signed into law in August, and it provides for a question on the spring ballot. The structure it proposes is unique in Illinois and untested, an elected board for a city library. And like a lot of new legislation, it leaves some questions unanswered. So we started thinking, there is already a type of library in Illinois that has an elected board, a library district. Since it's likely that we're going to have an elected board, what would it take for us to be a district? That was our starting point. As I see it, there are three futures for the Aurora Public Library. The first is to stay as we are, as city library. We currently have an appointed board, and the city council is responsible for our budget every year. To me, it seems very unlikely that this referendum won't pass and that we won't have an elected board following the spring election. Staying exactly as we are seems an unlikely option. Our second option is the legislation I just mentioned, which gives us an elected board within the city framework. The third option is converting to a library district. A library district is completely independent. The board is elected and approves the budget, and the library district is subject to the tax cap, which means that our tax levy can only go up by the rate of inflation unless we ask you by going to a referendum. Because of that independence, there's more transparency. District budgets aren't folded into a larger body's tax levy. We could expand our service area if the residents of the township, for instance, that are within the city limits wanted to join the library district. There's an established way for that to happen. I should say that the decision on whether to convert to a district library is with the city council and the library board, and no one has made any decisions yet. Let me tell you a little more about the pros and cons. If we stay a city library, even with that elected board model that was recently passed into law, we are more vulnerable to recession because it's harder for any city council to fully fund the library when we need a new fire engine, for instance. As we have less funding, it's harder for us to be able to invest in our collection and our buildings. It's hard to have a plan without stable funding. There's some potential conflict, too, between two elected boards that both consider themselves responsible for the library's budget and operations. Those of you who are really into library governance will know that village libraries have elected boards and are still part of their village. But the way budget decisions are made between villages and their libraries is usually really different from the way city libraries do it. We figured it would cost us more to run each year if we became a district. But as we did the research, we found that it would cost less than we initially thought. The costs associated with converting to a library district are about $152,000, including legal fees, accounting and payroll systems implementation, and audit and appraisal services. The ongoing costs, what it will cost us more each year, are $333,000, which includes utilities and ongoing costs for accounting and payroll. It's a pretty small proportion of the increase we're seeking, 2% of the total for conversion and 15% each year following. Most of the cost, payroll and accounting software and utilities, are things that the city currently does for us, so we will bear the cost if we become a district. When we talked to other libraries that are districts, they asked us about HR, about IT, about our union contract, about health insurance. They said, if the city does those things for you, then you have to figure in those costs. But we already handle our own HR, and we have for many years. We have a robust and talented IT department. We negotiate our union contract separate from the city and administer our own health plan. The additional costs have to do with the cost of utilities and the cost of the software package for accounting and payroll. We may need to add a half-time person to help us with implementing that new accounting and payroll software. Let's look at our current financial situation. Right now, in 2019, the library has an operating levy of $10.7 million. Our budgeted expenses for 2019 are $11.4 million. We won't spend more than our actual revenues. We'll delay some necessary expenditures to make sure we don't spend more than we already have. The library is 87% funded by property taxes, and our revenues come in on pretty much the same schedule that you pay your property taxes, twice per year. Every year in May, right before your spring tax payment comes in, our fund balance, what we have in the bank, is frighteningly low. In 2018, we came very close to not being able to pay our staff. It wasn't always this way, but during the recession, our revenues went down when home values went down, and we spent our fund balance then so we wouldn't have to reduce services when people need us the most. And even though the economy has pretty much recovered, our revenues have not. Even after service reductions and layoffs in 2016, we spend nearly every dollar to provide the services that you need today, with nothing left over for future planning. We know that we'll have costs in the future that our current revenues won't cover. We know we should spend more on books and movies and streaming. We have a minimum wage increase to think about. We'll need new roofs, boilers, windows, tuck pointing at all of our facilities at some point, as well as furnitures and computer and paint and carpet, and none of that is in the budget. Let's look a little more closely at that. Whether or not we become a district, and I'll mention again that no decisions have been made, we know that there are things that aren't accounted for in our current budget, and one of them is more materials. We know we need to increase our materials budget. Every time we ask you for your input on library services, we hear that you want more books, more DVDs, more downloadables, more streaming. And you're right, we should have those things. We would also consider joining a consortium so that you'll have easier access to other libraries' collections. Spending more on materials allows us to be more responsive to you. We also know that there will be costs in the near future to maintain our buildings and refresh our spaces. It's not that exciting to think about replacing a roof, but we still have to plan for it. It is exciting to think about making sure that our technology infrastructure can support our needs and your needs, and thinking about refreshing our spaces is the best of all. Our branches are 25 and 20 years old, and we know, because we heard it from you, that we need more study rooms, better spaces for kids and teens, and room for technology. We don't currently have anything in our budget for capital expenses, and even though we work through the city's budget process for these items, they're usually just taken out of our regular operating budget. We don't necessarily get more from the city just because we need new carpet and paint at West Branch, for instance. We need to start planning for these expenses. Finally, we also know that we need to build up what we call an operating reserve, a little extra money that helps us get from one tax payment to another. Most libraries have between a 25 and a 40% operating reserve. Ours was at 8% last year. Building that reserve allows us to manage your money more efficiently, to absorb unexpected new costs, and to hire the best people. Not just the most expensive people either. It can be hard to get the best people when your finances are unstable. I have another good example for a good need for an operating reserve. Right now, our bookmobile is 17 years old and 120,000 plus miles. It's been off-road almost 40 days this year. If we had an operating reserve, we would have ordered a new bookmobile a year ago, and it would be in place without any disruptions to the services to the people who need us most. Of course, we also look at our neighbor libraries to see how we compare. We are the second largest city in Illinois. We have the largest population by a lot of our neighbors. We have the smallest budget and the smallest staff. We're just above Elgin in terms of square footage, and we wouldn't be near that if it weren't for our new main library. So we're going to ask the City Council to increase our levy from a projected $12.5 million in 2020, which includes our debt, which is about $1.2 million a year, to $14.7 million. That's an increase of $2.2 million. It's a big increase, no doubt, and your first question is going to be, how much will my property taxes go up? So we broke it down here. If your home is around the median for Aurora, $217,000, then your taxes will go up about $35 per year. That's a little less than $3 every month. If you're a renter, then your landlord's property taxes will go up, and they might or might not pass that on to you. Again, 87% of the library's revenues come from property taxes. Unlike most other government agencies like park districts, schools, and so on, we don't get money from sales tax, transfer tax, excise tax, or much in the way of any other revenues. We collect a little for fines and lost books. We get some revenue from the state of Illinois and about $500,000 from a personal property replacement tax, left over from when the state eliminated that tax in the 1970s. 87% of our revenues are from property taxes, and that's just how it works in Illinois. This new amount, $14.7 million, will allow us to increase our materials budget, plan for known capital needs, and build an operating reserve. We'll be a healthy library that can serve our growing and vibrant community. We want to ask for this increase whether or not our board and the City Council decides that we will become a library district. Most of the increase has nothing to do with becoming a district and everything to do with serving this community. That's our proposal. I hope you found this information interesting and useful. I hope you have a clear understanding of what the library needs and how we plan to serve you better in the future, with greater access to materials, refreshed and responsive spaces, and better ability to change and adapt through stable funding. Please let us know your thoughts. You can complete our survey, email the board, or contact me directly. We have community meetings planned for all the dates listed above, and we'll keep you updated on this and other developments at aurorapubliclibrary.org. Thank you.